Hi, Chargers. Miss Gary again. I'm here to do our second section about what did the Vikings eat. And so now I'm going to talk specifically about the meat that they ate. Now, you got to understand where they lived. They had to eat, obviously, what was made available, just like every culture did at the time. So 25% of their diet actually was fish. So they would catch it in the ocean. They would do freshwater fish. So you need to keep that in mind. But what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to show you how to make actually dried meat. So we know dried meat primarily in the United States is beef jerky. So I'm going to show you how this process works and how to make it. Now, there was two different ways that they actually would dry out and preserve their meats. So one way would have been the way that Mrs. Gary's going to show you, which is to dehydrate it, meaning like you're taking all of the liquid out of the meat. Now, they didn't have dehydrators like what Miss Gary has, but what they would do is they would actually use the coastal winds, and they would lay their meat out and they would dry it that way. They also did this a lot with fish, believe it or not. And they did this so that they would be able to have meat sustain a shelf life for very long. Or if, like I said in the other videos, they travel. If they had to go somewhere to seek out resources when the crops were not in season, which Vikings were known for, they had to take a lot of their food with them. So the way that I'm doing is I'm going to do the beef jerky. The other way would be to salt their meat, which was actually a practice that was used all the way up even here in the United States until we actually had refrigeration. They would take the meats and they would layer them in layers of salt, and the salt would preserve the meat. So if you've ever heard of salted meat, that's what it is. It's meat that's not refrigerated, but it's packed in salt, and it's been able to preserve itself. So what I have here with me today is actually elk. So in the regions that the Vikings lived, they primarily ate fish. They did eat pork because they would have pigs. Or if they did hunt, they a lot of times would hunt caribou, which caribou and elk and deer are they're all in basically the same family. In the United States, primarily here in Oklahoma, a lot of people do go deer hunting. So that is, if you've ever heard of reference called venison, that is what it is. It's deer. So my family, my kids, my husband, myself, I grew up around hunting. I grew up around, we hunted for our own meat. We processed all of our own meat and stuff. So this is elk. And the reason I really like to use elk when doing this kind of recipe is because elk it's really lean compared to cow meat, but it's also got just a little bit of fat in it. So it's more so than venison. Venison tends to be extremely lean. So a lot of times in recipes, you kind of have to add fat to it. So anytime that I'm even using elk, even ground elk, a lot of times I have to add fat to it. So what I'm going to do is, this is my steak. Looks very similar to probably what you've seen your mom or dad start to prepare. And the one thing I always do tell kids, just a lesson. Well, first off, with anything that you're using raw meats or any kind of utensils, you always have to be supervised by an adult. And in this part, I would even encourage your parents or an adult to do this next part. So, because I am going to use a large knife, I'm going to be cutting the meat in a certain way, and it's not safe for kids to do. But that's what adults are for. So, the one thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take my meat and I'm going to lay it on my cutting board, and I'm going to cut it against the grain. So I'm going to start to cut my strips, my pieces, to about this size. Okay. And then I have a pan here, and then I just throw the meat in the pan, and I, cut up the pieces. After I have everything cut up, I decide, I've done different kinds of marinades before. I've even just, put a bunch of seasoning on it. So for time purposes, I'm actually going to stop right there because I want to show you guys what it looks like when it's all cut up and it's actually been sitting in a marinade. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so I'm back. So I'm going to move the camera so that you are able to see exactly what the meat looks like in the marinade, or just even the container. I went ahead and I marinated these, and I put this in last night. So I tend to kind of just marinate something overnight, and then I'm able just to use it the next day. I make this all the time for my family because my son loves it. He can grab a bunch and take it with him. My girls love it. I mean, it's just something whatever Mrs. Gary's just always done. So I'm now going to put this in my dehydrator. Now, again, the Vikings did not have dehydrators. They didn't have electricity. So this is kind of in some ways a little bit cheating, but this is the best way to do it. So my dehydrator I just got off of Amazon. It was fairly inexpensive. It's been a lot of fun because we've made jerky in it. I've done vegetables. I've dehydrated flowers in it. I've done all kinds of things. So just for fun projects and candles and all that kind of stuff. So it's different layers. As you can see, it comes apart, different layers. And so I'm going to now take my tongs, and I'm just going to simply take the pieces of meat, and I want to try to get them as flat as possible as I can. If you are using a marinade, it's probably going to drip down into your dehydrator. It's not a big deal because you can always get that off. So I want to make sure that I don't have pieces of meat that are touching, that I want to get them all about the same distance apart. And again, how long this is going to take determines how thick you actually cut your meat. So because you can also too set your temperature at different temps. So there's all kinds of recipes and things like that you can actually find online to work with a dehydrator. So one thing you need to know too, that not every single meal had meat. The meat was something that was important, but it was also too and always easy to come by. So because you had to hunt and you had to preserve it, and they dealt with weather, they dealt with different elements, their weaponry, all that kind of stuff. So what I found from my years of teaching and studying about the Vikings was that they were extremely resourceful. They were fascinating culture to learn about because even though they went through a lot of hardships, they were very much about family. And those of you that know Mrs. Gary know that family and community is very, very important. So I think sometimes people have this perception that Vikings were very, mean and rough and liked to steal from people, and that wasn't always the case. So I also loved that everybody had a job. Everybody had to help out. So it wasn't just the adults. The kids actually, believe it or not, helped out a lot in their culture. So you want to be a Viking, make sure you're helping out mom and dad at home. Okay. So I'm almost finished. This is going to be my third layer. And you guys, I'll probably see if I can kind of see how Mrs. Gary's doing this as best as possible. I'm just taking it, and like I said, it's juice is dripping around, but it's not it's not just going absolutely everywhere. And like with anything that you're doing in a kitchen, you always, always, always have to clean up your space. So just know that if you're doing this project with mom and dad, that you have to make sure that you are cleaning up your mess. Okay. See, we're getting close. Mrs. Gary kind of cut these quite a bit. Let's go ahead and get another layer. And making jerky is great because you can take this in the car with you if you're going on a long car ride. Beef jerky tends to be very lean. Doesn't have quite a lot of fat. But what I love about Mrs. Gary's jerky is that I know what's in it. Sometimes when you go to the store and you buy things, you start to look at the ingredients and you go, oh my goodness gracious, what in the world is even in this? And so this is kind of nice because I know exactly where this meat came from. I know exactly what is on it or in it, what I've seasoned it with. So that kind of makes Miss Gary's heart happy knowing that. All right. So I have the different layers of the jerky. You can kind of see it just like that. I'm now going to put the top on it. Let me see here. Let me pause. Oh, there it is. I moved to the top and I wasn't sure what I did with it. So the top itself is solid. Okay. And there's a thermometer at the bottom. Thermometer is right here. And so for this type of jerky, I'm going to put it about 140 or give or take. I like to kind of watch it and then I just turn it on. So the wonderful thing is now is all you have to do is just wait. Unfortunately, though, you have to wait about 15 to 16 hours. So, right now, at this time tomorrow, I will probably check it. When I wake up in the morning, I'll probably check it and then, kind of just determine, kind of feel it and stuff. And normally what happens is that you will start to see the meat kind of look like it's shrinking because it's taking all of the water and the liquid that is in the meat is being basically like taken out. So that is how you make beef jerky. So I love you guys, and I hope that you enjoyed learning about the Vikings. Thank you.